Hey, welcome back. It's been a little while since I filmed a podcast, so I'm really excited to be here today, and I'm excited to show you some finished objects finally, and a new whip, and talk a little bit about some acquisitions, which I had better go get because I don't have them with me right now. I caught the mid-afternoon winter sunlight in my living room, so I'm hoping that I'll stay warm and I'll have enough time to film this. I've got all of my things around me, I've got some notes. Let's get stuck into it. So why not kick off with some finished objects? Of course, the one I'm most excited to talk about is my recently completed low tide sweater. Hooray! I've been knitting on this since I think February and it's now June. This took me about 4 months of knitting. This is a pattern by Rachel Ilsley, also known as Unwind Knitwear. It is a top-down saddle shoulder cable and lace pullover. It has a beautiful central cable panel and central arm cable panels. I've talked about this lots of times already, so I won't go over all the details, but I will just remind you that I knit it in Knit Picks Gloss DK in the colour Kenai, which is this teal shade. And I have one 50-gram ball left. I did have to use a couple of meters of it for the bind off, but I have one 50-gram ball left. I started with 9 balls, I think, so that means this project used 400 grams of yarn. I'm very proud of this technically. This was the most difficult thing I have knit and completed. There was a tiny mishap with the blocking, and I did ever so slightly felt the sleeves. It's nothing too bad, but they didn't grow in length. They stayed about the same as they were before blocking. So that means that the jumper has kind of turned out with slightly short sleeves, which is a shame. But since I do have that 50-gram ball of yarn, I am planning to pick up those sleeves and add another cable, kind of repeat 12 rows, and make them long enough. Right now they're about bracelet length, so they sit above my watch, and I'd prefer if it sits below my watch. What else is there to say about this? The yarn is super soft, shiny and lovely, but I'd like to report I have only worn this I think 3 or 4 times, and there is a little bit of pilling already on the inside of the sleeve. There's some pilling. It's nothing horrendous, and I'll show you horrendous in a minute, but it is noticeable. So that's something to be aware of. I love the fit of this jumper. I love the style. Saddle shoulder is definitely a style that I want to knit again. And this pattern was beautifully written, very accurate technical instructions. So there's a lot of complicated contiguous knitting in the yoke region to get this saddle shoulder and have it all fit together, and the cables reach up into the ribbing, and you knit back and forth. There's short rows, and it's all done without breaking the yarn, which is very impressive. But sometimes you read the instructions and you're like, what are we doing here? But you just have to trust the process. It does make it a bit of a slower knit to start off with, but once you've memorized the cable pattern, this just flies. I actually got into a real rhythm for the sleeves, and I knit each of these sleeves in a couple of days, which is fast for me. So very happy that's done. Not the most wearable thing I've ever made. It's not very casual, but it is really beautiful, and I've gotten some compliments on it. If you saw my knitting plans for the year, I have been trying to get someone to be surprised that I knit something or ask me if I knit something. So I will this to work, and someone did say it was a nice color. They didn't realize I knit it, and no one really commented on it. And then the next day I wore my zipper sweater, which is inspired by Petite Knit's zipper sweater pattern. And I was sitting at lunch, and someone at the lunch table asked me if you can put zips into knits. And I kind of pointed at what I was wearing, and she was so surprised that I knit it. So like, this got no comments. I said, oh, I knit that jumper I wore yesterday too. And they were like, oh yeah. But the stockinette zip up sweater really turned some heads. So it goes to show people maybe don't appreciate the technical detail of some cables and lace, but they are extremely impressed when you sew a zipper into a jumper, which took me like an hour. And this took me probably 60 hours. I actually have been tracking how many hours of knitting all of my stuff's been taking. I'm hoping to get a little bit of a data breakdown later in the year about on what days I knit the most and how long each project took me. So I do have a record of how much time I spent on this, so I need to go and review those records and find that out. Okay, so I think that's enough about my low tide. I have a video all about it if you want to see the process of knitting it. But let's get into my next finished object. I have a surprise entrant. If you watched my last podcast video, you wouldn't have seen this because this didn't exist in my last podcast video. This is the two-fold sweater v-neck. The pattern is by Kadri, and this was a can I knit a sweater in a weekend kind of experiment. So this is knit out of Bendigo Woolen Mill's Special Blend 16 ply in the color Coal. It's basically black. So it's a super chunky knit, and I am so pleased with the fit, the pattern, the v-neck, and the fact that I was able to knit it in not quite a weekend, but 3 days. So 2 weekend days and 1 work day, for a total of 19 hours of knitting, which is so cool. The gauge for this one is 10 stitches per 4 inches, but I knitted actually closer to 11 stitches per 4 inches. So I did size up. I knit this in the size medium, which is the 3rd size. So yeah, it took me a lot of time, but I managed to cram it into a weekend. Then of course there was the whole weaving in the ends, blocking and all of that. So it didn't actually eventuate in that weekend, but still really cool. I've never knit one of Kadri's patterns before, and I really enjoyed it. I really liked it. It was quite brief, which is my preference. I've never knit a v-neck before, so I don't actually wear v-necks really at all. And I love this. I think it's really flattering. There was a moment where I was concerned the v-neck would be way too deep or too wide. Like there's a point at which if I had kind of shrugged my shoulders, I would have wriggled out of it. But I was able to fix that by picking up around the neckline and skipping some stitches and then doing a kind of cast off. The whole jumper is in stockinette. It's drop shoulder. And the finishings are this non-rolling stockinette, which is basically a knit through the back loop, regular bind off. It worked really well on the sleeves. They don't roll one bit, but for some reason, it didn't really work so well on the body. The body does roll. I know, black was a choice. I love wearing black, but knitting with it is such a pain. The body does roll. Not crazy, I did block it, but it does roll a little bit, so I'm not in love with the way the body looks. It makes me a bit nervous about doing a kind of stockinette finish on a project in the future. But yeah, it's not a problem on the sleeves and the neckline, so I'm not sure why that is. I knit this on 7mm needles, and I've worn it heaps. I've worn it more than my low tide sweater, even though I finished it a week after, 2 weeks after. I've probably worn this maybe 7 times. The big complaint, which I should have seen coming, is the pilling on this is insane. The inside of all the sleeves is totally pilled, but it already looks really ratty, which is a bummer. It's a real danger with super soft kind of merino blend yarns and larger gauge projects. This isn't a roving project. It was a plied yarn, but kind of, you know, it wasn't a chain net. It's not like a super tightly plied yarn. It was a little bit lofty and bulky, so I knew that might happen. It doesn't bother me hugely. I have a fabric pill shaver, which I might give a whirl now that I've showed you guys just how bad the peeling is, because I wanted to keep this for a couple of weeks to show you. I might clean it up now. What else is there to say about this? I filmed the whole process. It was really fun. I reckon it's such a good beginner project. It involved a little bit of knitting flat, some increases and decreases, but otherwise pretty simple. And I think the large gauge would be super motivating to a beginner. And I knit the sleeves long enough, finally. Compared to my low tide sweater sleeves, these are definitely the right length. So if I hold the collars together and I hold the sleeves up, you can see I've got about an extra maybe 2 inches of sleeve on my two-fold sweater. and that's definitely the right length. I could go a little shorter, but not much shorter. The blue jumper is a little bit short. And they're both relatively cropped in the body. I wasn't playing yarn chicken, but I had 600 grams of this yarn and I used 600 grams of yarn. So I don't have a ball to show you, but they were big 200 gram balls of yarn and I used it all. So I completely knit the body until I ran out. So it still ended up a little bit cropped. It's not too cropped by any means, but I have still yet to make, oh, that's not true. The only jumper I've made that basically isn't cropped or hip length is my zipper sweater, which is really quite long and oversized. So yeah, super happy with my 2-fold sweater v-neck designed by Kadri. Okay, now my garment finished objects are out of the way. I can talk about some other finished objects I have. This is crazy. I've got so much going on. I don't know what's happened, but my knitting motivation is so back. I've been knitting heaps. It's been freezing cold, which is helpful. And so I have also done some gift knitting. Let's start with, I knit what I'm calling my baby bear beanie. This is the Bear Ears beanie pattern by Tara Marie. This is a super cute baby beanie pattern. Why am I knitting a baby beanie pattern? Because one of my best friends told me the weekend before last that she is having a baby, which is very exciting. I don't have that many babies amongst my friendship group or my family, so when I heard, I knew I had to knit her something. And she and her husband love the outdoors, and they don't know whether they're having a boy or a girl, so I decided to knit this kind of super cute woodsy bear beanie pattern for her. I would show it to you, but I've already gifted it to her, so I got some photos and videos of it before I gave it away. I did modify this pattern a little bit, so this is a free pattern, which is really cool, but I actually saw another beanie. That one was knit in twisted rib, which I really liked, or half twisted rib, so the knits are twisted but the pearls aren't. And then you fold the brim up, so you get this kind of two-tone effect where on one side the knits are regular and the pearls are twisted, and then on the other side the pearls are regular and the knits are twisted. So I applied that same kind of texture to my beanie, but then I knit according to the Bear Ears beanie hat stitch counts, and I knit the ears the way that pattern describes them. I made up the decreases for the top of the hat. I just kind of decreased the edges like you would at the toe of a sock. So you kind of decrease at 4 points either side of one seam and either side of the other seam every other round. I did that until the hat was kind of like a hexagon shape at the top, and then I just grafted all the top stitches together. And that way I kind of had two corners on which to attach the bear ears. The bear ears was so quick. They probably took me like 15 minutes each. And the whole hat took me a couple of hours. So I knit it all in a day, or maybe 2 days to attach the ears. So it was such a fun knit. I used some scrap yarn. I used Fiddlesticks Australia Pepin 10 ply in the colour Rock, which is just a cool toned brown. And I knit according to the 3 to 12 month size, but because I added the ribbing, it's quite stretchy. So it seems quite small, but and you can fold the collar up, the cuff up twice, but you could also just fold it once and it really does stretch out big enough. So my friend's baby is due in December, which here is in summertime, so they won't be wearing it when they're born, but they will be wearing it probably from about 3 months old to 9 months old. So I'm hoping that it fits them perfectly. So yeah, that was super fun as my first completed baby knit ever. I can see why people get into baby knits because they're really, really satisfying. And babies kind of have to wear whatever you put them in. So I didn't have to worry about if they would like the color because they don't even know who they are or what's going on. For this next one, I have to go get a prop. I'll be right back. So the other gift that I knit is super exciting, not only because I love gift knitting, but also because I got an excuse to buy and use a new toy. This is a like Centro style 48 needle knitting machine. The story behind this one is that a family member asked me to frog a scarf that she owns and re-knit it for her. And in the process, I realized the yarn was really fine and very slippery. and the looming thought of having to knit that by hand was driving me crazy, but she needs a scarf. So I decided to get myself one of these knitting machines and to learn how to use it to knit her a scarf. There was a relatively steep but short learning curve, so I actually knit a prototype scarf, which technically is a finished object, but I'm not really sure I'm going to wear it. I'm not sure, I might gift it or I might donate it, but I did that with the Jet 12 ply wool and alpaca yarn from Patterns in the color cream, I think, or white. I used that as kind of a practice because I was getting frustrated with the original gift yarn, and then I went back to the original. So the scarf is super beautiful, silky green. I think it's rayon or viscose yarn. And the original scarf was just a kind of flat stockinette panel with increases and decreases, so it was a zigzag shape, and it was about more than 6 feet long. So I decided to change it up a little bit, and through trial and error and a bit of persistence, I was able to use this machine to turn it into a tube scarf with tassels and a slip stitch design. So every few stitches I dropped all the way down, and then I kind of knit them back up with a crochet hook, but I skipped every other stitch. So it created kind of a drop stitch, kind of larger raised ridge every few columns. And the reason why I'm not showing you the scarf with me right now is because I gave it away this morning. I took it to its final recipient and she was very excited for a new lease of life on her scarf. So that was super fun. That took me a weekend for that experiment and I got 2 scarves out of it. Definitely quicker than hand knitting a scarf like that, especially if I left the yarn single, because I ended up holding it double. If I left the yarn single and it was maybe a fingering weight yarn, that would have taken me so long. So it was kind of 3 birds with 1 stone. And now I have this cool machine. So I'm thinking about different ways I can use it to knit fun things. I might want to do some chunky hats for people. It seems like such a fun way to use up scraps, of which I am collecting quite a few now that I finish projects. I don't tend to have heaps of leftover yarn because I mostly knit from secondhand collections which I've bought, and there is only a certain amount of yarn and it's usually on the smaller side, so I don't end up having, you know, several balls of yarn left over. I kind of usually have like 10 grams, so it's too much to throw away, but not enough to knit almost anything with. So a striped beanie or maybe a stripy paneled drop shoulder jumper could be cool. Obviously you're limited by gauge with that machine because it can only knit at 1 gauge. It does have 3 tension knobs, so you can adjust the size of the finished project a little bit, but not much. The practice scarf took 300 grams of the Patterns Jet yarn, and the actual gift scarf was about 280 grams, but I was given that yarn and then gave it away, so it doesn't count for my stash down. So I think that is all of my finished objects for right now. Really happy with that. And I've added up all the yarn that's left my stash, and I am down another 1.35 or 1.36 kilos, which is so cool. I had a bit of a slower start to the year in terms of my output, and I'm really pleased I've been able to pick it up a little bit. The knitting machine has kind of opened up that whole world for me. I couldn't have knit, you know, several hundred grams in a weekend by hand. Obviously the 2-fold sweater was 600 grams in a weekend, so maybe I can actually do that. Because it's such a chunky knit. So that was a huge win. The low tide sweater being finished is 400 grams out of my stash, and the baby bear beanie was only 55 grams. Okay, I need to slow down and just drink my tea. I'm getting really excited. Now, I don't want to talk about knitting machines without an honourable mention to my homemade knitting machine. I'm going to give you a sneak peek, guys. Of course, I'm going to have a video all about this, but this machine is so close to being done. I don't want to spoil it too much. I'm just going to give you a really quick demo. It's very loud. The only thing it's missing is the yarn feeder, the yarn tensioning arm, and the ribber attachment. they're sitting right there. So I'm going to harass my boyfriend into finishing this off so that I can film a video all about the printing process. This is all 3D printed at home. The needles were ordered from the US. It's been many months in the making and I am so excited to use it. And of course, I'll film that whole experience and learning how to knit socks on a machine. Okay, let's move on to my whips. So of course, the perfect middle ground between a finished object and a work in progress is a pair of socks where I've finished one sock, but not the other sock. So I have one completed sock. These are the Drowse pattern by Kaori Katsurada or Kao Knit. The yarn here was a gift from my sister. She bought it from a dyer from Arizona, Delicious Yarns. This is from Delicious Yarns, hand dyed in Arizona. The color is Claret Cup, which I'm told is some sort of wine decanter. It's a lovely mid-tone, cool-toned brown color with speckles of orange and white. The speckles are kind of long, so it ends up as little stripes. This pattern, if you couldn't tell from the way it looks, is a brioche leg sock pattern. It's like a house sock or a bed sock. And I cast this on ages ago, a really long time. I think it got interrupted by my low tide sweater and the test knit I did earlier in the year. And the leg of this first sock took me so long. I have never experienced a knit going so slowly as the leg of this sock did. I am not a fan of brioche. I love how it looks. I love how it feels. I hate knitting it. It's kind of fun to learn. It's really easy, but it's just like double knitting, and I don't like the overly exaggerated movements and having to wrap my yarn around the needle a lot, and the fact that you need to do 2 rounds of brioche to kind of get 1 round of brioche. So it builds up half as quickly as regular knitting. It just drives me crazy. This took so long. The pattern says to knit this leg to like 9 inches. I am not really confident in inches, so I kept being like, oh, that's probably 9 inches, and then I would measure it and it'd be like 3 inches, and then I'd say, oh, that's probably 9 inches now. It's like 4 inches. This is 5.5 inches, and I actually had a little hissy and I gave up, and I was just like, well, this is as long as it's going to be. So I just moved on. The rest of the sock I smashed out in like 3 or 4 days. This sock is highly textural. It has a brioche twisted rib cuff, brioche leg, the slip stitch heel turn, and a stockinette, gusset, and sole with a regular 1x1 rib instep, and then a stockinette toe. I think this yarn is beautiful, but it's probably not the right yarn for this. These are always destined to be home socks, so I'm not really worried about how they look. But as you can see, the yarn reacted really differently to each of these stitches. In the brioche, there's a really interesting effect that happens where every other round is either kind of the outside visible fabric, or it's like a background fabric. And the way these stripes lined up pulled the yarn, so it kind of forms these thick, chunky stripes that travel around the outside layer of the fabric, and then they're in the background, and then they're on the visible side, and then they're in the background. So that's kind of cool, I guess. But with brioche, there is a seam. Yeah, there's a seam where you switch from knitting all the knits to knitting all the purls. And because of that, the thick stripes are kind of massively jogged along the seam, which I didn't realize until it was done. So that's a bit of a shame. I don't think brioche lends itself well to self-striping yarns. Now I know. The yarn looks totally different in the instep and of course on the sole of the foot. The stripes are much thinner and they're every other row. So it kind of looks like I knit this using lots of different yarns. For the toe, I used some self-dyed Bendigo Woolen Mills 4-ply sock yarn. This I dyed at home using onion skins. So that's pretty cool. I love the color. I love this yarn. It looks really awesome as like a contrast heel and toe. But enough about that. And this is a whip segment. So I immediately cast on the second sock as soon as I finished the first. And this has been way less painful. I don't know if I've grown as an individual or what, but I have managed to knit through this all in the last week. I'm kind of 2/3 of the way through the leg. I think another day or two and I can smash out the rest of this leg. And then the rest of the sock just flies by in comparison. So if you ever feel like you feel that socks take too long and you're not sure if they're for you, maybe try knitting a brioche sock and then go back to knitting a regular sock and you'll feel like a regular sock is an absolute vacation in comparison. I'll make sure I film a little bit to demonstrate how the sock looks on, but basically the leg scrunches up. It's meant to be worn like a leg warmer, like scrunched down at the ankle. And I'm really, really keen to have these as bed socks because I get so cold, and that's what's pushing me through. I want the socks pretty badly. So I'm estimating I'll have quite a bit of leftover of this yarn, and I do not know what to do with it. I'll probably have to knit some baby socks or some shorty ankle socks with it because I just can't see myself using this colorway in another project with any other colors really. I have a bit of an unusual whip here to show you. If you've watched my first ever video, you'll know that when I was a kid, I learned how to crochet. I learned to crochet before I learned to knit. And I've had this pattern in my queue for a little while and I finally cast it on. So this is actually a crochet whip. So I won't talk about it for too long, but this is the Alpenhaus throw blanket. It is designed by, oh my God, why don't I get these things up in a sensible amount of time? This is designed by Jessica Reeves Potaz, and it's a simple crochet blanket. The setup was a little bit challenging. Haven't really followed any crochet patterns before ever. This is also in US terminology, which is a little bit different than the UK terminology that I learnt as a kid. But once I got past that first row, it is just a simple 1 row repeat. So same on the front, same on the back. And it's basically a zigzag ripple blanket. So you crochet into the space on the previous row, and then you do a what we call a double crochet here, but a single crochet in US terms, and then a chain, and you just do that all the way along. And then at the valleys and at the peaks, you do a special different stitch to kind of either pinch the fabric together or to add an extra bit of fabric so that it turns. Really simple. I'm knitting this on a 6.5mm crochet hook. This is just my cheap plastic crochet hook. I have a small pencil case full of like random crochet hooks. I don't really own any other crochet paraphernalia. And I knit this all in just one session so far. So this is going to be, I think, a 60-inch long blanket, and I'm probably at least 2 inches in. So I imagine I can knock this out in a month of knitting. I should say crocheting. I could knock this out in a month of crocheting, but I just want this to be my couch project. So I just want to literally put this on my couch, which funnily enough is the exact color of this yarn. And just pick it up when I don't feel like knitting, when I'm sick of what I'm working on, when it's late and I don't want to worry about dropping stitches, because crochet, obviously, it's so much easier to not drop your stitches. And it's a blanket, it's no big deal. The reason I'm using this particular yarn, which is Patterns Fireside Chunky, this was, shocker, a secondhand yarn purchase, like all of my yarn. I got this online. I was mailed 12 balls of this. This is 100 grams per ball, so that is 1.2 kilos of this yarn. In my head, I wanted to knit some garments with it. I wanted to knit a, oh my gosh, what is the name of that sweater, that waffle patterned sweater? I'll throw up a picture of it. But when I received it and I felt it, I realized this is probably too rough or too rustic for yarn. It's got a very thick ply. I think it's like 2 strands plied together. So it's very textural. It's a lovely oatmeal color, but it also is not superwash. And I was going to knit my boyfriend something with this, but I don't want to give him a garment that's not superwash at the moment because he's not used to having things in hand wash only. So I assume it would get felted. So I thought, what would this lovely color and this lovely chunky yarn lend itself to? And I have so much of it. And I thought a blanket. I'll be able to use up pretty much all of the yarn in the blanket. So yeah, this will be my little couch project. I won't spend too much time talking about it. Let me know if you want updates on this one or if not, because it's crochet. But yeah, that's the Alpenhaus throw. I want to just have a quick honourable mention to an old WIP that I have dug out. This lovely garment is my book club cardigan. It is part of a book club cardigan. Here it is. I was part of the book club cardigan knit along. I was inspired to do this last year by Sarah from Two Pearls in a Pod, and it was really, really fun. And this is how far I got last year before the kind of knit along ended. And then I lost steam. I'm knitting this in Stonehenge Fibre Mills Shepherd's Wool worsted in the color navy, I'm pretty sure. This is a US yarn. It's beautiful non-superwash merino. And I had 3 hanks of it, or 3 skeins, which they're not 100 gram skeins. They are some imperial measurements. So they're more than 100 grams each. I think they're 130 grams each. I can't remember what that is equivalent in like ounces. So I had about 390 grams, which was already on the slightly too low side for the pattern. It was, you know, under the pattern yardage by just a little bit. And then as the knit along went on, people were reporting that the pattern used more yarn than required. So I was definitely not going to have enough to finish. This would cost me a lot to get shipped over here. And because this was bought secondhand, obviously. And so I decided to turn this into a vest. So the way that the cardigan's knit, it's a drop shoulder with obviously heavy cabling. So I'm just going to do the body section and the V-neck and the cardigan part, but not do the sleeves. I will just pick those up and do some ribbing. So it's kind of a drop shoulder cardigan. The choice of yarn from the beginning, it's very dark, so it's quite hard to see, and this is easily the most complex cables I've ever knit. And I'm very impressed that I thought I could do this 6 months into my knitting career, but here we are. I just got to the point, especially once I joined it in the round under the arms, sorry, not in the round, but so that the front and the back are all one piece because they'd been knit kind of in panels. I timed my next round and it took me 20 minutes. I'm a little quicker now, but then I obviously put it away and now I pulled it back out and I had to remember the pattern. So it's like 15-20 minutes per round. And the thought of having to do another, I don't know, 100 rounds or something, or 100 rows is really overwhelming. So I have done a couple of rows on this just to revive it and like stop it from feeling like I've totally given up on it, because I love the yarn. It's a very thin worsted weight yarn and I have a feeling it's going to block out really beautifully. The pattern is beautiful. I've seen everyone's finished objects. I want one. I'd love a really nice kind of dark vest, but I don't want to spend months and months knitting on this when I could be doing other stuff. So I'm feeling a little lost with this one. I'm going to just keep it out. I'm going to just try to do a row or two every time I remember. And eventually it's got to be done, right? Like it's a finite amount of knitting. So yeah, this is kind of a reinvigorated WIP that I will keep you updated on when I really get going on it. And that's it for WIPs. I'm leaving some space for a bit of gift knitting. I've got some birthdays coming up, and but I'm also thinking about my next garment cast on. They always feel like a really big commitment and I don't like just casting on willy-nilly, so I really want to make sure I'm making the right choice. So I have 2 tiny swatches to show you. I'm not a big swatcher, but I'm trying to be, but I'm literally not a big swatcher because look how small this is, but I just hate wasting my time on swatches. But I really needed to know the gauge for these 2. So I have 2 little swatches here. This first one is knit up in Heirloom Colourworks yarn. This was an over-dyed project I did. So I bought a baby pink yarn and I over-dyed it to hot pink. And this texture is a broken rib texture. And the pattern I have in mind was originally the Pearl Jacket by Helene Baber, but I'm also looking at her Pearl Sweater. So they are both V-neck. One is a cardigan, one is a sweater. So to me, Broken Rib is the best of both worlds. It's that squishy texture like a brioche, but it doesn't have that same effect of having to knit everything twice. I just love the textural element, and this is a super wash yarn, so it's really, really squishy. Then I'm also very excited about this yarn. So this is Drops Sky, and I've got this color gray. It's sort of a gray melange, slightly mild gray. It's a mid-tone. And this is an alpaca, wool, and polyamide blend. It's quite fluffy and it's so soft. I don't know why. It doesn't look soft, so I always thought this was going to be difficult to pick a garment for, but it's not. It's super soft. This is just a stockinette panel with a bit of garter stitch edging. I have heaps of this yarn. I got this secondhand. I think I have like maybe 1,300 meters of it. So that for me is probably almost enough for 2 garments, maybe, we'll see. And the one I have in mind is Petite Knit's April cardigan. A really beautiful round neck button-up cardigan. So now that I've got these 2 swatches, these are probably 2 projects I am going to knit. I just don't want to cast them on right at this moment. So I'll update you guys in future when I do cast these on. Alrighty, that's almost all of my projects I want to talk about, but I do have some acquisitions. Of course, I acquired my knitting machine, which is very exciting. But I've also got some other stuff. I want to show you some things I bought at my kind of local yarn festival, which was a few weekends ago. It's at a marketplace here in a big kind of metal shed, and they do weekend markets there every weekend, but they also host specialized markets. So this one was the Wool Expo. So it's the wool focused weekend, and they get lots and lots of vendors from all over Australia. And it's always held kind of at the start of winter, which is really exciting and gets you really keen to knit. Of course, this year I'm doing a yarn no buy, which was a bit of a bummer, but I still really wanted to go because I just love to look at everything there. And I thought I might buy some things that aren't yarn. And I was right. I also got to meet up with 2 of my friends there, Morgan and Steph. And we wandered around together and had a really good time. So I'm really glad I went. And I didn't come home empty-handed. I have 2 knitting related acquisitions that I'm excited to share. So let me start with the actual accessory. I bought some beautiful fingerless gloves. These are knit in New Zealand possum fibre. So possums are an invasive species there, and their fibre though is used in garments. It's very, very soft, feels a lot like cashmere to me. It's quite fluffy. And if you've seen one of my previous videos, I have tried to knit myself gloves before and I kind of missized them. They ended up being a little small. So I only got one of them done and they've just been sitting there, and the weather's gotten so cold. When I saw these in this beautiful bone color, I knew I just wanted gloves like this. I didn't really necessarily want to knit them. I just wanted to have them. So I bought them. I think they were around $30. And I've worn them heaps already just in the last, like, less than a month. So really happy with this purchase. The only thing is that I can feel a bind off on the inside of the double knit cuff, and it's a little bit tight. So you have to kind of wriggle your hand in there, but once it's in, you can't feel it. And it's this beautiful, fluffy, a little bit lighter than my skin tone fingerless glove. I'm loving these. So yeah, these are an acquisition of a finished object. And the other thing I bought while I was at the show, and my friend Morgan actually bought the same thing, there was a book vendor there, and she obviously had lots of lovely pattern books. And I couldn't help myself. I bought Summerlee's sock project book, which I've been eyeing for a long time. I have tried to get it from the library before, but it has a long wait time every time because it's really popular. And I love Summerlee's patterns. Her SOS basic sock pattern is the one that I've followed. It's the one I learned to knit socks with. And I love the colors she uses. And she has some really beautiful textured patterns in here. and I just thought it would really go nicely in my collection of kind of inspiring knitting books. I have the Japanese Knitting Stitch Bible, I have the Knitivation Stitch Dictionary, which is a colourwork pattern book. It's just motifs. And now I have this sock project book. So it has, you know, advice for knitting socks, some patterns in different sizes. It's got cables, it's got colourwork. I've had such a good time reading through this. And once these Drowse socks are finished, I think my next pair of socks are going to be from this book, and I'm going to knit them in Summer's classic neon colour palette, which I'm really excited about. And I reckon they're going to be colourwork. So stay tuned for that. And this cost me $39.99, and I did not buy any yarn at the show. I was very proud of myself. Steph did buy some yarn, which I was so jealous of. It's a very beautiful navy coloured sock yarn with stellina, so that's like a sparkly thread. So it looked like stars on a night sky, and when my yarn ban is over, I will be buying it. I'll be ordering some. It's from Three Sisters Yarn, I'm pretty sure. So I've got a photo of it, and that's going down in my to buy list. And yeah, other than that, we got to pet some alpacas. We got to see lots of kind of fibre adjacent stuff. So we got to see some spinning wheels, there's lots of accessories there. Of course, I got to see lots of other people wearing their hand knits, which is always really fun. And I just had a good time, and I'm looking forward to going again next year. I think we might have covered everything. The sunlight is leaving me, so I think that it's trying to tell me that it's time to wrap it up. I hope that was all really interesting to you. Probably maybe a little bit longer of a podcast episode than I usually do, but obviously I've been busy. I'm hoping by next time I can have my Drowse socks done and a new pair of socks cast on. I'm hoping I'll have some gift knit beanies to show you. I'll probably have cast on my next garment for myself. If you want more details on the things I'm knitting, you can go follow me on Ravelry. I do keep quite intense notes over there, and all like my needle sizes and my yardage and all of that. So do go check that out. You can also follow me on Instagram. I post there sometimes. You might get an early sneak peek about some of my projects. And I think that's it. Thanks so much for joining me. I hope this is really fun for you to watch. Let me know any questions you might have. And I'll see you around here pretty soon. See ya.